Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Paola, and today I have the one and only, the one, the myth, the legend, Ava. Hello, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. And I'm really glad that we got to make this work again.
Yeah.
We are here to talk about Ava's most recent book, aka A Study in Drowning. Would you like to tell us a little bit about what inspired you to write it?
A Study in Drowning was, I think, kind of like the first kernel of inspiration came from Shakespeare, actually, and specifically the authorship theories about Shakespeare that were really popular in the 19th century. It's called kind of collectively anti-Stratfordian theory, and it's essentially like a group of theories that try to push the belief that Shakespeare was not actually the author of the works that are attributed to him. Maybe he didn't even exist at all, and obviously this theory is not taken very seriously today. It's pretty much been debunked, but, historically it was actually something that people believed in. Certain people believed in very strongly. They went to like very extreme lengths to try and discover. They dug up graves. They invented cipher machines. Like they were really, really into this theory. So when I read about that, that was super interesting to me. And I kind of became interested in not Shakespeare himself, but just like what impact it would have if an author of Shakespeare's kind of influence and caliber was like did turn out to be a fraud. The kind of how would society kind of grapple with that, because he's such an important figure. He represents so much more than just his plays. He represents like Western cultural heritage and English national identity, and there's so much wrapped up in him as a figure. So I kind of wanted to grapple with that idea in fiction, and then I kind of created this secondary world and this author who kind of plays that role in this fantasy world.
I remember you telling me about the idea of this book back when we were talking about The Wolf and the Woodsman. And I just remember being like, these people dug up graves. That's like, what?
I know. It makes like what Effie and Preston do seem pretty like tame and normal.
Yeah, no, for real. There's something that I really adore about your book, your settings. Like they are very, very atmospheric, and I always feel like I'm right there, or at least like the tone of it is always so present. So, what is the world building process like?
So for all of my books, I've usually just started with kind of a real historical period and then taken it from there. So obviously, the setting of A Study in Drowning is very much a parallel for like mid-century England and Wales, just the British Isles. I mean, once I went to Shakespeare, I was like, okay, well, I kind of want it to be an English-inspired setting. And then the author that actually influenced Murthan, the author in the book, is the Welsh poet Dylan Thomas, and he's a very interesting kind of controversial figure who has kind of an interesting reception, where he's critically acclaimed by like some critics and then some people think it's like commercial tripe, and he was a very complicated man with very complicated interpersonal relationships. But yeah, I've always thought of setting as being so incredibly crucial to the story. I would never want to write a book where I didn't feel like it had to be set here. Like, what about this setting is allowing you to tell a story that no other possible setting could?
Oh, hell yeah. I love that answer. Oh my goodness. Yes, reading it and always feeling like it was raining, even though I read it during the summer. I was like, "Oh, this feels so gloomy in the
Yeah.
best way." Yeah.
Wishful thinking for me because I live in California, so it's never raining here.
There's love stories in all of your work. I distinctly remember a lot of people really loving the romance in The Wolf and the Woodsman. But this, you've said that this is your first true romance story. So why is that?
Like you said, with both of my previous books, there have been love stories, but I've never considered them to be kind of as central as the love story in A Study in Drowning. And I think part of that is just that this is a book kind of about like passion and obsession to a certain extent, whether it's the passion that like Effie feels, for Angharad, the book, whether it's like kind of the passion that Preston, even though he would never use this word, the passion that he feels for like his scholarship, and it's these are just characters that are very passionate and have very, very strong feelings for each other and whatever else is going on in the story. Yeah, I think that kind of the intensity of that feeling is what makes this a romance to me. And some people might disagree. I've gotten some reviews that are like, the romance isn't really like the main plot of the book, and I'm like, I kind of think it is, but I don't know.
Yeah, I kind of think it is too. On that topic, though, why academic rivals?
Dark academia is like it's very new as a subgenre, so I don't think it really has like a set definition. I think we're still kind of defining what that actually means. But for me, I wanted to write a book that actually felt like it was giving some kind of commentary or like take on academia, not just like a book set in school, which
Yeah.
again, like I don't know how people want to define. Some people say you have to kind of have that commentary in order for it to be a dark academia book. Some people say it's more of like an aesthetic thing. I mean, I don't know, but I wanted to write a book that actually had some type of commentary on academia and academic culture. And so obviously that's very much reflected in Effie and Preston, who have very different kind of takes on the idea of scholarship, on how academia should operate. You know, Preston believes that it's the pursuit of absolute truth, and Effie has more of an opinion, you know, that's kind of more based on emotion. And, you know, she's very loyal to kind of her personal feelings about the subjects that she studies. So they kind of have a rivalry over that just as much as they have a rivalry over the actual kind of subject matter, right? Like their approaches to scholarship and to academia are very different. Their philosophies are very different. So yeah, I wanted to write about that and kind of have these debates about like what is the purpose of academia, how should scholarship kind of work, like is there a limit to, you know, the search for absolute truth, or some things like actually more important, how important is kind of like the intangible legacy of an author as opposed to like the truth, you know, what should academia really value. Those are all super interesting questions to me, and I think that kind of exploring that through their rivalry was it's very fun.
Ooh, I love that too. I also think that it has to make a commentary on what the institution is, what it stands for, and how that can be very damaging to the people who are participating in it. I'll say the same thing for The Wolf and the Woodsman, and the same thing for Juniper and Thorn. You are incredible with the themes that you take on, and I really found this particular trope, the academic rivals, to be so like heartwarming, and I really like how different they are. I love that Effie is basically a fangirl and that Preston is a total skeptic. So what was it like developing it?
I always wanted it to be this kind of like skeptic versus believer dynamic. And it's actually interesting in like the very, very first kind of idea of the book that I had. Effie was kind of the skeptic and Preston was the believer. And then I like did the little role reversal because I don't know, I just like the idea of Effie being like a reader, and like there's an argument to be made that Anghara, the book, is actually a YA book, and like the idea that she's like a YA reader in a book that's, you know, for YA readers. And I just really like that idea. And, you know, obviously kind of goes without saying that, you know, I'm a big reader, and that was always such a really important part of like my identity and my coping mechanism. Because for Effie, it's like it is a coping mechanism, but it's also like in some sense damaging to her because she lives so much in this kind of like imaginary world. So to have Preston be so opposite and like challenge that in like a gentle way, but like, you know, he slowly starts to kind of peel back this fairy tale world that she's been living in and show her that, you know, the real world is like it's okay, it's a safe place for her to be too.
I love that. I love that so much. And I love the fact that it used to be the opposite, like the role
Mm-hmm.
reversal. I found that so interesting. I also noticed that you mentioned Zelda Fitzgerald in the acknowledgments,
Mm-hmm.
and Effie's last name is Zelda's maiden name. So is there a correlation there?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. For those who don't know, Zelda Fitzgerald is the wife of F. Scott Fitzgerald, the author of The Great Gatsby and obviously other famous classic American novels. And she and Scott Fitzgerald had a very, I'll just say, tumultuous relationship. He actually, so you know the line that like that's the best thing in the world, a girl can be a beautiful little fool, that line from The Great Gatsby. So that's actually something Zelda said that he just like put in the book and took credit for. And he did this a lot. He read her diaries and like put stuff that she wrote in her diaries into his books. He actually like shared her diary with like Hemingway and like some of his other friends, and they talked about like publishing her diary. Very, very toxic relationship to say the least. She was also someone who dealt with like serious mental illness, eventually Scott Fitzgerald had her institutionalized in an asylum and she burned to death there. So I don't know, she was just a very big kind of influence on the book, obviously. And, that can be seen reflected in Effie's character and kind of the discussions of like women's roles in the lives of these like, male geniuses and how, so many of them are very abusive to the women in their lives.
I find that so interesting because we tend to value, I guess, the cultural input that a person can have without really valuing how they actually were, regardless of how they treated the people around them, like their actual legacy regarding their own, like, microcosm, I guess. People
Yeah,
at
no, I
home.
mean, that's so much what the book is about is like, is this work of Mirth and this fictional work, is it still valuable? Like, can we still hold it in the same cultural place if we know all of this history behind it and we know, all of these, like, to put it mildly, very problematic aspects about the author? Like, can we still hold it in the same sense and give it the same cultural weight? And is it even worth drawing up these issues because this is a work that's so important and this is an author that's so valuable? Like, should these things, be hidden for quote unquote the greater good? And that's obviously the question that's very central to A Study in Drowning that I don't think that question has an easy answer personally. And I think that's what makes it so interesting is it's still something that we as a society haven't, kind of fixated on and landed on yet.
I really love the way that you took that on. And I'd like to say that you left it up to the audience to answer that question, which is something I also really love about your books.
I like some ambiguity personally to my fiction, especially to my endings. There's something nice about, finishing a book and still having some kind of unresolved questions, and it just makes you feel deeply. I don't know. Yeah, the ambiguity is something that I actually kind of enjoy in my fiction, and things not having a clear-cut answer because like that's just life.
Literally, on that topic, is there something that you would like readers to take away from Effie's story?
I mean, I say usually for all my books, my goal is to provoke strong emotions in people and to ask kind of interesting questions. There's a quote that I love by Donna Tartt that is like someone asked her, I guess, like about the responsibility or like maybe like what she wants people to take away from work. I'm not exactly sure, but her answer was like, the novelist's first job is to entertain. People are reading your book in airports and in hospital waiting rooms. And I don't know, I've been thinking about that a lot. Like, people look to books for, escapism in a sense, but also to kind of have catharsis, I suppose. And I think that those are, two equally important things. So yeah, feel intense feelings, ask interesting questions. I would love it if, there were teenagers or teenage girls, who found that Effie's character resonated with them, who felt seen by the book. It's kind of a book about the importance of books on like both a social and an interpersonal level. So if, A Study in Drowning resonates with any reader the same way that Anhara resonates with Effie, then that would mean a lot to me.
I love that. Ava, thank you so, so much for joining me once again on the channel. I love A Study in Drowning. I love every single one of your books. I really hope that more readers get to experience the incredible, incredible work that you've written. I have no words. Like your work means a lot to me, and I'm sure there's a lot of people who feel the same way. Everybody, don't forget to check the description below for links to A Study in Drowning and ways to support Ava as an author. Don't forget that if you've read it and you loved it, rate it, review it. Thank you. Thank you for watching. Thank you, Ava, for doing this with me, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.